Okay, we are now recording.
Is everybody in?
So just a quick reminder, if you've got the green, then you're live. If you don't have the green ring, then none of our guests will be able to hear you. And we are recording.
Okay, thank you. How many people do we have online?
You have Brock Byers, Dick Knowles, and Shirley Bird.
Okay, so thank you everybody for coming. Really quick before we do introductions, because it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I would like to start with a quote, point of privilege. Who are we as human beings if we ignore the suffering of others? And so with that, I would like to go around the room and do introductions. We'll start with Dr. Horton.
Okay, I'm Larry Horton, retired superintendent of schools here in Sweet Home, working on the health committee. Two main things. It's not working.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Now you can.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay. Larry Horton, retired superintendent of schools, working on the health committee on two main projects, homeless community and also with Western University and working on a mentoring program.
Jeff Lynn, I'm the chief of police here at Sweet Home and been working with the health committee on some livability issues, most recently the homeless aspect of our community.
I'm Sean Morgan, Community Services Officer and Homeless Liaison, mostly on Police Department, and working with this committee on the homeless issue.
Thank you.
Bob Dalton, I'm on the Health Committee, Chair of the Health Fair, and on the Parks Board.
Ray, do you want to introduce yourself?
Ray Towery, city manager and attempting IT technician, production manager. We'll see how it goes tonight.
Well, thank you for doing that today.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Jim Gorley, school board member, and a few other things.
Okay. Dick, would you like to
And
introduce yourself?
And I'm Dick Knowles, member of this committee.
Thank you. Brock, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good evening. My name is Brock Byers. I'm a program manager for the Family Assistance and Resource Group, and we do street outreach, and I've been participating in the homeless subcommittee.
Thank you. Sherry Bird, is that?
Shirley.
Shirley. Sorry.
Okay, hi, this is Shirley Bird. I'm the founder and executive director of Family Assistance and Resource Center Group, and we focus mainly on housing, on outreach for people who are unhoused in Lynn County, focusing on mainly East Lynn County.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now that's still everybody, right? Okay. So before us, we have the approval of the minutes. If everybody's had an opportunity to look at them, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I didn't get the minutes, but that's fine.
Okay. Thank you, Dick. We'll see that we can get some out from Julie, if that's possible. Oh, okay. Dick, they're on the website.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. So that brings us to committee reports, and I'd like to move an addendum to Dr. Horton's subcommittee on community homelessness first.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Okay, I appreciate it.
I do see it. So when that's on, I'm on. All right, thank you. Well, I appreciate everyone being here tonight, and I would just kind of like to bring you all up to date as to what this subcommittee has been working on since you assigned it to us, what, a month ago? At that point in time, we convinced Brock Byers to facilitate the group. And Brock actually brought a group of, I believe, 8 or 9 individuals together last week, starting on Monday, and we met for 4 days. Unfortunately, I got sick, and so I ended up missing the 2 middle days, so I got appointed to talk here tonight. That's how that works. We know how that goes. So at any rate, there was a tremendous amount of discussion and some good input, and I really appreciate Brock and Shirley from the Family Assistance Resource Group. They have a tremendous amount of knowledge and expertise in this area, so they were a really, really big help. What I'd like to do is kind of just bring you up to date as to what I know that's going on in the homeless area right now. I did talk with Bethany Young, the pastor at the Nazarene Church, and she said that they have 17 tents that are there, and 26 individuals are living in those tents. And it is her expectation that come March 31st that they end up moving from that site to some location, undetermined at this time. I think that part of our group's assignment is to try and come up with some alternatives as to where they might go as of March or April 1st, I guess. So that's partially what we've been working on, is trying to figure out how to move forward with that. One thing that has happened that I just found out about today from Bethany Young is that she and Shirley Bird did communicate with each other, and Family Assistance and Resource Group is going to assist in the management of the camp. Since they have the expertise, they're able to bring in resources that the Nazarene Church cannot bring in at this point in time. So Shirley's group is starting to work with the Nazarene Church and Bethany Young to try and come up with how they can best assist those individuals that are currently at the Nazarene Church. But that's kind of a side note as to just where we are currently with that. But the actual meetings that took place last week came up with a lot of ideas, and I guess why don't we go ahead and switch to the next slide, if we could, please. This is the first test for Ray. Well, the cover page looks real good, and we may or may not be able to get to the second page. There we go. We spent a week coming up with a common understanding of what homelessness is. We talked about barriers, housing, medical issues, legal issues, food, services, etc. Then we decided that we needed to create a tagline, which is, to me is kind of like a motto, a vision, a mission, and some values. And so that was part of the assignment over the week that the group worked on. Identified some housing and service frameworks, the way maybe we want it to be, the way it is now, and then an action plan on how to start getting to where we want to be. That's going to be a next step as we start meeting in the future. Several of us on Friday took a trip to a location where we thought this might be at least one area to consider as we look at possibly moving. It was some property owned by the city and the county behind the current maintenance area, and it was an area that we just basically looked at and said, this could be a site. There's probably many others out. Well, I don't know about many, but there are others that potentially are out there. But as we walked it, we talked about what it would take to get a site like that ready. And of course, there's going to be a lot of groundwork, literally groundwork, that's going to need to be done in order to make any site ready in order to move the camp to that, or camp probably isn't the best word to use, but to move the individuals to another area. So there's going to need to be groundwork. There's going to need to be bathrooms. There's going to need to be water. There's going to need to be possibly showers, possibly electricity. So those are some of the things that we started looking at as we were actually walking the site and thinking to ourselves, how are we going to make this really happen so that these people can set up their transitional housing there. So after the field trip, Brock, I really appreciate all of the work that Brock has done on this project. Over the weekend, he went back and tried to summarize everything that we've done over the last week. He talked about the next steps, transitioning from the emergency housing that basically is what they are in now, and how do we move from that transitioning to something else, and what's that going to look like? And that's still work that the committee's going to have to delve into as we spend time on this project over the next 2 months. I'm not for sure, Brock, what you mean by service book and service understanding.
Yeah, what that is there is currently a service book. It's a book that's been deployed for Lynn and Benton County, and we're currently working on one for just East Lynn County of all the services and helpful areas and things that we can assist our clients and stuff with, getting that out to the various departments and certain people that find that useful.
All right, thank you. Ray, you want to switch to the next slide? Good job. The tagline, helping people help themselves. That's kind of the overarching thought that we want to look at, is how can we help these people learn how to help themselves? The vision that the group came up with, there were a lot of different ideas discussed, a lot of time and energy spent on trying to figure out what that vision was going to be. What do we really want for Sweet Home? And what the final version of it was improving the livability in our community through hope and wholeness. So that would be a vision that, I think we would want for our entire community. A mission statement, to provide a safe, clean, diverse environment where people experiencing unstable living conditions can receive services, improving lives with dignity and respect. So it's not just a matter of providing a place where they can go to, but then how do we help them address the issues that they're facing? How do we make the unstable more stable? And so that's the mission that the group came up with. Any questions on any of those so far? Now, many of you were involved in this committee, so if I'm missing something or you want to add something, please feel free to do so. Dick, I know you were there for a day or two, and I know Sean and Jeff were there. I know Shirley was there, and Brock, if I'm missing anything, please don't be afraid to fill in, okay? So let's go ahead and switch the page if there are no questions on those. So there are barriers and problems that we're going to, that these people are facing, that in essence, we are going to have to deal with. And I don't want to read the whole list to you. I think most of you, just by looking at the list can figure out, yep, that's pretty close to what the issues are. And those are the things that we're going to have to try and come up with answers for and see if there's a way that we can help. What I would say is down at the bottom, the community, unclear community support or public support. I know that the city has been getting a lot of comments, both negative and positive, and that is the issue that we're dealing with. I know the police department has had lots of questions concerning what on earth is going on. But the bottom line is that the problem's not going to go away. It's here, and we need to face it, and we need to deal with it in a respectful and honorable way that can be the best for our community. It may not make everybody happy as to what the final outcomes are and what the final actions are, but I'm not sure that's our charge to make everybody happy. I think if you look at our mission, that's our mission, and that's what we need to focus on. Are there any questions on any of those issues that are listed? Or does anybody want to add anything from the group that was in the meetings?
The only thing I'd add is just bear in mind, this is what I would consider a little bit more than a draft. This is, the team has seen it, and this is probably the first time members of this council has seen it. And we're happy to make changes or hear other thoughts and keep that available for everybody.
Good point, Brock. And I did actually write, I handed out paper copies of the slides. And I actually wrote draft across the top because it is in a draft form. It is in a, and it may have to stay in a draft form as things change. This document will probably be a living document that will end up changing as time goes on. So thank you, Brock, for that input. Ray, you want to hit the next one? Okay, the slide's better than my computer. I apologize. I was running out of ink as I started to print these. And so the picture on the screen is far better than the picture in your packet. Family Assistance and Resource Group has installed some cameras at the current location, and this is a picture from that one of their cameras. That is currently at the Nazarene Church on the corner of Holly Road at 416, I think it is, or something like that at the church. So this is what they're living in now. It is better than what they were living in before. Before this became available, many of them were living in the doorways of many of our businesses throughout town. Some of them were living under the bridge. Some of them were living in the bushes wherever they could find a place. And this became originally, as I know many of you have already heard from Bethany, that originally she had only 4 individuals that were staying here with her. And like I said at the very beginning of this, it's now up to 26 individuals. So they've moved from what was really emergency situations to something that is a little bit better. We've helped construct these shelters for them. They are sitting on platforms where they are off the ground, they are dry. New tents were purchased through grant money. All of the residents there have new tents, and then those tents are covered with the tarps, and it is at least keeping the water off of their personal belongings and off of their tents and off their sleeping gear. I talked with several of the people that are using the facilities, and the one gentleman said that he was so warm that he actually had to get outside of his sleeping bag and just sleep on top of his sleeping bag, even during the cold nights. So they are fairly effective. I think Bethany Young did an excellent job of taking on the challenge of helping these people not freeze to death. And she has actually designed something that is effective in what she wanted to do, and that was to keep them a little bit warmer through the winter. But this can't stay the way it is. We all know that. We have to establish a year-round emergency housing solution, someplace where all of these people can go. It will probably be a transitional type setup where they move to a new area that probably is similar to this, and then hopefully it will, throughout the months, get better. There may become of a more temporary type housing instead of tents, actually some kind of structure. I know that a lot of us have looked at different types of structures that have been used in different communities like Eugene, Corvallis, Walla Walla. There are some very, very easy to construct and inexpensive structures that can be built and set up. And you can make them as elaborate as you want them. Some of the places that we've looked at have electricity inside of these units. Some of them even have heaters inside of them. My guess is we're not going to probably be able to do that, but who knows? Maybe we will. I think it'll depend on what kind of funding that we can find. So that would probably be the next step, would be to come up with some kind of a something that is better than a tent, but yet it's not permanent housing. It's a transitional type setup so that services can be provided in one area so that these people can start putting their lives back together. Once they start that process, then hopefully they can, on their own, along with help from the services that can be provided at these locations, they can start moving into more permanent housing, and they can start putting their lives back together. So I would really appreciate it if, Brock, if you would talk about the low barrier and high barrier and explain to everyone what that means.
Sure, and perhaps Shirley, if you want. I mean, she's actually the expert in this area, but
okay, that'd be fine.
Why don't we do that, Shirley? But this graph will kind of lead you through the from anything from the emergency shelter on up to permanent housing, or actually permanent may not be the best word, but long-term type housing. And maybe Shirley can do a summary of kind of each of the areas and the dynamic there.
Thank you, Brock. Well, we start at the low barrier end, where we probably are right now at Beth's situation, where people are coming in off the street. They still have some A&D problems. They still might be wrestling with some mental illness problems. They may lack ID. They may have lost all of their birth certificates and stuff like that. They really have nothing to build on to get back into housing. That low barrier is usually based on behavior and whether they get to move up into a temporary transitional situation is based on their behaviors and whether they comply with services and access resources. But we'll be assisting them do that on the property. Temporary transitioning housing is when they are in services, they're working programs, they are following through with whatever commitments that they decided to make that make their lives a little better. And that's what we're promoting, is a better stability for them, a way to make their lives easier. And some of them won't graduate to permanent housing, but we're hoping that most of them will. And that's high barrier. That's where you're seriously in a program, you're clean, you're sober, you're on your medication, and you are able to handle a day-to-day living situation on your own. Those programs usually graduate people back into long-term housing. All of the things you see for programs and resources are things that we do already, a lot of them. Those would be services that we want to offer at the shelter for anybody, low barrier to high barrier, that's interested in working those programs.
Very good. Thank you both very much.
So Shirley, could I butt in a little bit?
Yes, please do.
Just kind of for the rest of the group, there are in fact emergency shelters that are pretty close to high barrier. And I think there are fewer and fewer of them, mostly because people are becoming aware that the difficulties with A&D and mental health issues, that sort of thing, are so overwhelming, it's probably an awful lot to expect. And I'm only responding because when I first looked at this, the arrows, from low barrier up to high appear to be up to high barrier, but even transitional housing, there are subsets so that low to medium barrier, medium to high barrier can also be arranged. And I would also, just for, again, the group, as we're beginning to look for somewhere to actually do something permanent or whatever, the staffing issues become different as you go from low barrier to high barrier. And it's not a real clear linear match, but it's pretty close. So we need to kind of keep that in mind as we discuss what we're going to do in the future.
Thank you, Dick. That's very true. Very true. Low barrier is usually very behavior based, and there is a difference in between the low barrier and the medium barrier for sure. Thank you, Dick.
Okay, go ahead,
If
Jeff.
I could just kind of put some things that were put into perspective for me during the few days we met, whereas we had talked about some of the low barrier, high barrier, and really discussed who of the individuals that are currently at the Nazarene site would be eligible or even able to move into more of a long-term permanent housing type of situation right now. And the answer was, Sean can correct me if I'm wrong, was zero. None of our current individuals that are at the Nazarene Church are near that. And there could be some exceptions. That might be generalizing, but basically the overwhelming majority of them aren't near the ability to survive not survive, but function in a more stable long-term housing situation right now. And I thought that brought into a lot of where we kind of stand right now. We're more at an emergency barrier, emergency shelter, low barrier need until we can get some of these services in place. And I don't think it's going to be an over a weekend solution for these, or even a month solution where some of the individuals that are at the Nazarene Church are going to be able to even progress through to more of a the transitional whatever the temporary transitional housing. So it's going to be a long haul process.
It will be. Any other comments from anyone else?
I just like to pat Jeff on the back. I was going to ask that question at the end of the presentation, and that's clearly one of the issues that we have to deal with. It's really not a horrible problem, not dissimilar to what I brought up before. Many of these folks are just habitually low barrier, and it's a pretty quick jump, not to high, but to medium barrier. But you have to, as a staff, as a community, as a resource team, you just have to kind of be there to walk them through the steps. People are pretty resilient, and they can pull this off. It's just we as a leadership / community group have to provide the options.
Okay, thank you, Dick. Anyone else?
Just when you were talking
Jim?
about, are you almost done with your presentation?
Yes, one more page after this one.
I'll wait for you.
Okay, we'll turn to the last one. This is kind of what we've been talking about. It's just maybe more clear. What is emergency shelter? Well, a Conestoga hut is basically, we probably should have had a picture of one in there, but basically what it looks like is about an 8 by 12, I'm going to say structure that has a floor on it. And then you take, I guess it would be hog fencing or some type of fencing that bends, and it makes a Conestoga shape so that it actually looks like a Conestoga wagon. And then you wrap insulation around that, and then you put some kind of barrier over it that would keep the rain out of it. You put a door at one end of it that has a lock on it, so that homeless people, one of the main things they complain about is they don't have a place to keep their stuff safe. And so this would be a way of locking their door and keeping their stuff inside so that other people couldn't steal it or take it. Then there's a window at the other end so that there is a flow-through ventilation. The people that I've talked with that are using them, they say they're very, very effective. Most of them do not have electricity in them, but they are still very warm. They usually there's some kind of a bed inside of them. They can be made to be very nice if the people choose to do so. And they're fairly inexpensive to build, and they're very easy to construct. I mean, you can build one probably with a group that has some skills with a hammer and nails and a saw in probably about 4 or 5 hours. And the cost is probably between $1,000 and $2,000 in materials. So they're very within range of most people getting them together. And so as a community, if we decided that we wanted to do something like that, I'm sure that we can come up with funds to try and do something. But in addition to just the structure itself, some people would be living in motorhomes, some would be living in tents. You would hope that there would be some kind of case management going on at that emergency shelter area. Within the case management, there would be medical help, there'd be mental health, there would be food help, clothing help, a lot of different services that these people would need. And somebody is going to have to provide that. I think that there are agencies out there, if I'm not mistaken, that are currently doing it. I think Family Assistance and Resource Group, that's part of their mission, is to provide those kinds of services, and they have the connections to make those things happen. Then from the emergency shelter, you'd go into the temporary transitional housing, which might be like a tiny home. It might be an apartment building. It might be some type of group setting. So that would be more of a a temporary transitional type housing. And then from there, you would hope that they would be able to eventually work their way into some kind of permanent housing where they pretty much are responsible for themselves. And that pretty much in 4 days, I think we actually got an awful lot. We raised a lot of questions. We discussed a lot of things. And this is kind of a summary of where we currently are. The next step will be action steps and action plans as to how do we move forward in this. Brock is still trying to figure out when we're going to have these meetings. So hopefully in the very near future. My goal would be within at least a week or 2 weeks. I'm hoping that we can continue with our next meeting and take what we have written down so far and actually figure out an action plan to make it happen. So, Jim, I know you said you had a question.
Well, I think it comes down to building needs, assessment of what electricity, your action plan, but I didn't know whether you guys are planning on doing assessment on. I could see that if you're wanting to have services there, place for
Right.
to store things for that, to come down and them to actually have a little bit of an office there to meet with people.
Right.
That, and so I'm just wondering if you guys have talked about that.
Well, we talked about that there would have to be some place where the individuals could meet with their case manager and with other people that are providing services. They're getting services right now, if I'm not mistaken. Quite a few of them. And I think they're just meeting in there's no facility.
Sometimes in a car, sometimes inside the church, depending on where there's space.
Yeah. So yes, as we look at a location, definitely some place that would be able to have electricity where we could have computers hooked up and people that are providing the services could actually work with the clients. Yeah. So yeah, that would definitely be part of what we're looking at is needs.
So I'm not familiar with setting up this type of a situation from the administrative part. When we identify a piece of property that would work for this need long term, is there resources through these entities to help fund that? Is there been any conversation about how that's going to work?
I think I'll let Shirley and Brock address that because that's what they do, is they figure out how to fund these things. That's part of what they do.
Well, this is Brock. From our standpoint, as part of our charter, we are donation and grant based. We've recently acquired a grant of which this could become part of it since we serve all of Lynn County. We've also applied for some emergency funds through I guess it's through the federal to the state for another $500,000. Whether we have all of the money or some of the money, I think we'll need to put together the action plan. But I think, as was stated earlier, we definitely need a location, and this team will definitely put together aspects of that as far as, what are the resources needed to achieve, what level of goals this team would set. I mean, we could certainly build a beautiful facility and grounds and such, or, this is what we can provide. And this is, so I usually start with a to-be like state, and then we give an as is, and then we show how to really get to that to-be from as is. And I think Jeff pointed out earlier, it's not just, we implement and off we go. It'll be, transformational as we go. But, the first piece is finding that piece of property or that environment that would best suit the needs of Sweet Home.
Thank you.
Is the legal aspect a big issue?
I think, did you hear the question, Brock?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
Is the legal aspect a big issue for the city and the community?
I'm not sure legal in what sense, but I know for us, we have been meeting with our insurance provider. We have to scope out what that means. So if you're serving, say, a large community, your insurance requirements are quite a bit different. Because it is in our charter, we are, looking at what I call emergency services, which is that lowest barrier. And that lowest barrier includes lots of issues of anything from mental illness to alcohol and drug issues. And that does require, additional insurance riders and things like that. So I know from at least the evaluation that FAC has been doing, we're evaluating, to minimize the risk for everybody. As far as legality, I have spoken directly with the Walla Walla operation on their policies, procedures, as well as the founder of how they kind of integrated with their city and work closely with their city to implement, a site with a facility, with a partnership. In their case, it wasn't Samaritan, it was Providence. to distribute anything from medications to other medical services and other service providers. So, as we transition and go from where we currently are, which is providing simple emergency housing, to a little bit more function, to eventually being able to transition easily through that low to medium to high situation. But the legality will be partially, we will need to work with the city, because there's certainly legal aspects and rules and boundaries and consequences, and those things would still require working through. But I think it would be worked through to the benefit of everyone. I'm sure if you talk to Chief Lynn, the difficulties with, dealing with certain individuals, if we have this facility, then we can deal differently with some of these individuals as well, and have kind of, I think you put it, the bite to the issues at hand.
Teeth.
That's it. And then I don't know, we will certainly have to obey all of the code and, building codes and all those aspects. So it's not, just going in there and, well, we get a waiver for this or waiver for that. We really need to work closely with the city to ensure, that's why I put in there, we'll have little to no things like power or water. Every little emergency shelter won't have power and water, but we hope to have that in order to serve things like showers or other aspects. But we are investigating other means, FAC is, as far as having portable showers, portable laundry facilities.
If I may jump in, if we're calling it a subcommittee, they're doing, I think, some fantastic work, and really has some great conversation over the days, and really it's getting to a point where that action plan is going to be, start to be put together, and that's really one of the next steps. What I want to make sure that we have involved our community in some of the decision making on what this is. The next steps are going to look like, because that community support and that community input, I think, is going to be vital for the success of it, and not just the community, but also the council. If the council is not fully supportive of it, or maybe they want to see something different, I think that's such a huge factor as well. And so I'm not sure when the best time is to really get everybody, get that input from the community and get that feedback from the council on the direction to go, but the group is pretty close to starting to make some phone calls to say, this is what we'd like to do, and this is our view of what this piece of property could look like. But if that's outside of the norms that the community is going to accept, or that the council is going to go with, then we should know that sooner rather than later.
Good point.
Well, this is Bob. One of the questions I had is, in the beginning of this, there were a few, and it seems like the few has grown into a small population. And my question one is, are the residents that are there currently, are they all in the Sweet Home area, or have we actually had others migrate into Sweet Home because we have a camp?
We're looking at Sean, because Sean's the one that is probably working directly with the individuals more than anyone.
So throughout the summer, they were all from Sweet Home. In the last month or so, there have been a number of them. I haven't gotten to know who they are real well, and track down how and why they're here. But there are some folks who haven't really been from Sweet Home and who I don't know. I'm going to guess in the range of 8, approximately. So, but I don't know a lot more than that yet, about why and how they're here.
I was kind of suspecting that might be occurring to some degree, and I guess that's where Sweet Home possibly, or whoever, works with surrounding cities to collaborate some of these efforts, because obviously you can learn from one another in this process. And, you know, I heard earlier, I was mentioned we could build this great Mecca. And I go, well, if we build a great Mecca that's so attractive, we'll become the great Mecca.
Yeah,
And also, you know, I guess one thing definitely needs to happen and to be addressed, and I commend the group at the work you've done so far. I think one thing I always look back, even further back, are we missing some opportunities and programs and services that can be put into place for individuals and families out there before they ever get to the point of needing to live on the street, or, you know, through, I guess I go back, how do we stop it before it ever becomes? And to me, I know Dick and I have talked about those types of topics, making sure that we have mental health services in place in our communities. That's one of my biggest goals I would like to see, is if we have those types of services available, families have access to that and they get the help before they ever get to the crisis part of their life. And I think those are some of the crucial things that working backwards instead of working forward sometimes. I know, like at MANA, one of the questions I had when I challenged that group, I said, you're wanting more and more volunteers to provide more and more food services, but really your goal would be to work yourself out of this job, not work yourself to adding more. And part of that is helping people with the resources they need and have access to get healthy and whole, and housing and jobs. So I think we need to always keep that on our plate and in sight as an opportunity.
And Bob, if I can jump back to your first question on, you know, servicing those from outside our community. That's been, I think, one of the biggest concerns that I've had, and I know we had quite a few discussions during some of these meetings on that. I'm 100% in favor of helping our own. If we've grown them, let's help them out. But I'm completely opposed to, if you build it, they will come type of mentality. And I think, you know, this community would be as well. And so that's been a big topic. And one of the things that's been discussed is almost a residency requirement for portions of this, that you have to be from Sweet Home to access some of this. Now it's touchy for a lot of people, but
it'd be harder.
This community, I think, will completely shut down if they see a big influx from the rest of the county coming here. And I know I wouldn't support it at all if that's the case.
Brock, you wanted to say something?
Well, basically, I totally concur with that. And it's really, our solution is for Sweet Home. And there can be some boundaries and conditions and such that can be worked out as well. I know from an FAC standpoint, we service Lynn County. We would love to see a solution, micro solutions in Lebanon. We'd love to see it in Albany. We'd love to see it in these other communities and scaled to the size needed for those communities, but not, I agree. There's an optimal or optimization and those level of services. You know, as we saw this summer by the fires, people can get into an emergency situation fairly quickly that have that aren't chronically homeless, that we also want to help in this community as well. It's not just some of the individuals that we're helping currently, but you know, anybody that needs, I think someone phrased it earlier, anybody that needs these type of services, it's a consolidation point for everyone. But I think we all support the idea of, you know, what's being provided here is for Sweet Home.
If I might,
Dick?
yeah, this is Dick Coles. The other thing you have to worry about is that other shelters are handling large numbers, that's in italics, of Sweet Home residents already. So there's a fair number of folks who are getting support services in Benton and, well, Lebanon. Brock and Shirley are probably more aware of that than anyone. And actually, I know people in Lincoln County that are actually from Sweet Home, but they just prefer whatever. You always run into this whole constitutional issue where people have a right to move around wherever they want, but it's just a cautionary note. I like the idea also of making sure we're not acting as a magnet, but we have to be careful how we define that, I think, and see if we can't help finding our own, in quotes, and serve them, not just the ones that are living here now, but those that are living other places, and allow them a chance to come back home.
I agree. I have personally seen when we go to a shelter outside of Sweet Home, kids that graduated from here, and it's disheartening. But the fact is our capacity to help people transition back into housing is limited, and the
So-
ability to get them into stable paying jobs is limited as well. So if we
Yeah.
can get people to stay in the communities they're from, then we can serve people better. And what we're looking at for the housing costs and what's ahead of us is difficult.
Sorry,
Yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I kind of just want to go back to something that Bob said.
Okay.
In research that I have done and seen, and I think it was Gresham and Rent in Washington that have seen quite a bit of success in their programs. One of the things that Mr. Dalton said is catching the people before they actually become homeless was actually the largest indicator of success, that when they could catch people before they were homeless, they were able to stop that downward slide at a much higher rate than catching people after they became homeless. I don't see that anywhere in what we've talked about today, and I don't have an answer for that either. But I think that's something that the group should certainly look at, and see if there are resources for that. I would assume that's going to be things like, rent help, mortgage help, utilities, those kinds of things. And I don't know that we have those sources locally. I think here and there between the different churches and Shem and whatnot, those resources are probably out there, but I certainly know I'm not aware of them.
I think as people that we have in the community that are living in their motorhomes and their cars in people's driveways, as they find there's a place they can go that they're not going to be harassed by the neighbors, they'll migrate that way. But having worked at the high school, at any given time, we have a large number of students that are homeless and couch surfing, and the dynamics that are going on with their families, that is way beyond the scope that we can do here. It's incredible what these families are enduring right now. And so I think that we just need to catch the ones we can and direct the ones that we can get services to before that happens. But I just don't think that that's within our scope. That's just there's no way that we can do that. And I don't know that there's a single group that can do that with the cost of housing, the lack of jobs, everything going on, the mental health issues. It's just beyond us. So
if I might, actually the Lynn County, actually it's bigger than that, but CSC, Community Services Consortium, they help with rent payments and keeping people's houses up to standards, that sort of stuff. Lynn Benton Housing Authority has all kinds of programs to help people with rent and all that. And that is in fact going on in Sweet Home.
Mm-hmm.
It's quiet as it should be, but it's significant. So I mean, we can probably get a sense of the number, but that all falls back on the fact there just aren't enough places to live.
So do the people in the community know where, I mean, so if we have a facility like this, is this something that people could go there and get that kind of help? Would those services be available there?
I think that's what Jim was talking about and others. You have to have an office space, something where a case manager or someone can help. This is what Shirley Bird does all day, and that's what Brock probably does all day. It's just that tends to be one-on-one. It'd be nice if you had a person and 4 or 5 people could come together. But I know the housing authority people are out here. Bob and I have sat in at adult service teams. Community court has people. I mean, there are ways to find the information. But, you know, if you've got a 3,000 person wait list at the housing authority, it's because there's nowhere to live. It isn't because people aren't taking time to help. There's just nowhere to go. So, I mean, it's a mixed bag. It's very, very mixed.
Thank you. Yes, Jim?
As a school board member, and then one of the, at least it brings up the point
Another
about the kids. And it was something that when Bob was talking about catching people early in the cycle, when you have kids that are already couch surfing and they're going towards that direction of a long-term housing problem, how do we catch those kids early and get them, make sure that they continue on with their school and get to where they need to be so that they can have the job to get them out of that poverty and the long-term housing crisis. That's one issue. The second thing is, as Lisa and I have been traveling, and we've had to travel a lot lately, and we have seen more homelessness this year than we've ever seen. It's not just in Oregon. It's not just in Washington. It's in Idaho. It's in North Dakota. It's in Montana. It's in South Dakota. It's in California. It's in Nevada. It's all over. And last night, just to bring it home, we're on our way from Washington, and we stopped at a rest area. And normally at a rest area, you see about 4 or 5 cars. There was over 100 cars in that rest area with people in them that were sleeping. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe they weren't all homeless, but there's something going on.
They weren't staying in hotels.
They weren't staying in hotels. They weren't somewhere else. They were in a rest area. And I don't know. I'm just saying that there's a large issue here. We have to deal with our own issue. I understand that. But we may have people traveling through that may need a place for a night or something. And we'll have to deal with that also, that may not be from this area, but they may need a place to stay for a night or something. And so it's going to be a big issue. It's going to be a lot of, the community is going to have to look at this issue and have buy-in. They're going to have to do that, because I don't know how long it's going to be or how long this issue is going to go on, but it's there, and we're in the middle of it right now.
Thank you for the work you're doing on this. It's a huge difference from where we were at and where we are. So.
We will continue to work on it. Like I said, we're just now starting to get into the action plans. There's no way this group is going to solve the economical issues of our country. There's no way this is going. I think we need to focus in on what we can do and do it. And then if we want to take on more, then we start taking on more. But I think as a group, we're going to need to hone in on what we can do right now to make a difference. I think this group, the health committee, has worked on a resource list for 2-3 years now. The problem is there's no place where people can go to get help. If we create a location where people know they can go to get help, maybe we will solve some of the problems before they get started. Maybe we will be able to help those that are in their tents. But we need a central location somewhere that is easily accessed by people in our community, whether they're homeless or not, whether they're on the verge of becoming homeless. And I think we can do that. I think we can come up with a location where we can have an emergency place where people can stay, I think we can come up with something in that location that would provide a spot where the services that I know Brock and Shirley, they work with these people all of the time. I know that Dick Knowles and I know that Bob Dalton have been working with these same groups of people for years. But there's no place here in Sweet Home that they can meet and talk with the people that need the help. So if, you know, I guess that's what I see as a major point of concern that we need to address as this committee starts to work on actions. So I guess that's the end of my rant and rave.
May I share a story? Just a brief one that of a lady that we helped who was looking, who was living in her car in the Safeway parking lot. She had been abandoned by her partner and had no resource information about Sweet Home at all, didn't know who to call, didn't know where to go. And I just happened to walk up to her on outreach because she looked lost. She was in her car with nothing. And all she needed was some resource information for CARDVA, for a domestic violence group, who came immediately out to Sweet Home, filled up her tank, and sent her home to Portland to her children. In our grant that we've received, we have allotted money for a resource hub so that so people who live in Sweet Home and people who don't live in Sweet Home would have access to that information that would easily help them move on to the next step, whether they're homeless, passing through, or a member of the community.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Shirley.
Any
other comments from?
Probably want to talk about that CSC program a little bit and the help for folks who are on the edge. I've seen it work personally in the last year a couple of times. So I know they do some. There are programs out there functioning, and maybe there's ways as a community, and I'm not sure whether that's in the mission that we're talking about here, but maybe there's ways the community can support those programs that are in place like that in the school district in its efforts. I don't know how yet, but there's certainly things in play already for that. But it's a big problem for a lot of folks.
Well, I want to personally thank everyone that's been serving and doing this work and will continue to do this work. But I especially want to thank Brock and Shirley for their input on all of this, because their knowledge is invaluable. I think with their knowledge, we can truly move forward. So thank you all.
It's exciting to see change that'll help people. So, all right. So that brings us back to our regular agenda. Community health fair. Bob, do you have anything to report?
As far as the health fair, no. The only thing that I've been working with some Samaritan contacts and Marty Cahill, just the idea of around the vaccinations, investigating the idea of, is that possible to have that happen here in Sweet Home? So I'm kind of transferring emails back and forth. And so I got some open dialogue with that along that for our own community. So that's what I'm working on.
So Lisa, if I might.
Yes.
This is something actually I haven't talked to Bob about. Last Thursday I was on a meeting and someone from the med school was on. They're doing a summit. They do an annual, well, it's probably the third annual, I don't know. Anyway, they do a summit and it's an all-day summit. They're getting stuck like everyone is. It's a virtual now, so holding 8 hours worth of virtual meetings turns out to be somewhat of a chore. They did one last year, had an extraordinary keynote speaker, and then it seemed like a couple hundred people stayed around for the rest of the day, which is good for them. They're doing one this year. She was just asking for ideas of another keynote speaker and whatever. And within about a half an hour, it was presented something that Bob and I talked a little bit about, that because of the COVID, this might be a time for the various events to be collaborating around, if not a major event, maybe one or two events. Theirs is going to be, interestingly enough, the day before our health fair is scheduled. But Albany has their major resource fair in May. They had to cancel it last year. They're already talking canceling it this year, which there goes what we were just talking about. How do people find out where they can get clothing and socks and things for cold weather? I mean, they used to rely on these things. So I'll talk to Bob a little bit more about it, but it may make sense for us as Sweet Home to talk to the med school and maybe collaborate with them. They can do, these days in virtual meetings, you can do subgroups during the meeting, and you can choose to go to a presentation by CSC or by the housing group or Love Inc. or the stuff that we've done at the health fair. Wouldn't be 40 it wouldn't be 40 vendors that we normally would have, but it may be maybe a couple of dozen that are shared across these events. And it wouldn't just be ourselves in Albany, but the smaller communities have their own little meetings, Brownsville, Harrisburg, things like that I tend to go to. So I just wanted to let the group know that might be something. I may be coming back to the group next month, and maybe we could talk about how to hone this. And Bob doesn't know it yet, but he and I'll have a meeting first, and probably get some other folks involved too. But this whole COVID thing is being distressful because people can't get together and plan the way they used to. So anyway, I just wanted to bring it up.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? All right, thank you, Dick and Bob, and we will just keep us apprised on this. Western University, Larry?
Yeah, quick report. Last time you asked me if there was a way that high school students and some of the university students could actually meet either virtually or in person, depending on what we can and cannot do in May. And so I contacted both sets of people, and they are more than willing to either do a virtual or an in-person. And they would probably have one or two, or there's really 3 of the Western University students that are doing the actual mentoring. And my guess is all 3 of them would be on board for doing this. And then the high school instructor would probably be willing to do it. Kristen Adams is willing to do it. And I'm sure that they can get some high school kids that would be willing to come and share their experience that they've had together over this year. So May is what I basically heard last time. If you want it different than that date, let me know. But I would set it up for May if that's what will work for everybody. And I'll talk with Tom Yaris at the high school about the school board.
Okay.
Does that work?
It sounds good. Let's put it on the calendar. So.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. That's awesome. All right. So I'm assuming that we're not talking about the Hero Banner project, but you got a school thing.
Yes. I think everybody got this mental health toolkit from ODE. It's exactly what we've been harping on with the state now for years, and it's starting to look a lot more like a document that is coming from the ground up. It's talking about trauma-informed practices, which is now being used in all the schools as much as we can. And especially Sweet Home has got this all in our stuff, and the these things are going that direction. If everybody wants to read this, and maybe next time you can talk about it, and I'll have the school district's policies here also for mental health, so you can look at those and see how they integrate.
Were those sent out to the rest of us, or?
Dick, I will give you one of these. I can either leave it here at the city, or we can.
I can send you the link.
We can send
Yeah,
you
there
the
you
link
go.
to where this is.
That's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
But it's a good thing. It's exciting to start to see this move towards what I think is a workable document, and I like that. And so if everybody takes a look at it, I'll bring that information from the school district and see if we can make sure that everybody knows what we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that, let's go around and make sure that everybody's been able to report out on what they have. Larry, do you have anything else?
Well, probably the only thing that I would say is that we need to find a location for this site, a site for the camp. And I know some of us have talked about some city property. We've talked about county property. We've talked about private property. We need to find a site, and it's my understanding, Jeff, that it needs to be close enough that they can access services. In other words, it can't be 10 miles out of town.
Correct.
It has to be close to where they can access services.
Yes.
And what I would say is, if you know of a place that you think is appropriate that we need to be looking at, let us know. Let the committee know, because the community, if the community knows someplace that would be acceptable, I hope they let us know. If the county or the city council knows some place that they think is appropriate, let us know. I'm willing to contact the county commissioners. Maybe they have some place that they would be willing to recommend that we look at.
I've been in touch with them talking about it.
Okay, we need to find a place. We cannot move on any of this until we find a site. And that's number one. And so I don't know if the law says, does it have to be a private site, or does it have to be a public site, or is there any regulations on it, or can it be on private?
It doesn't really address either of those. I think it's indifferent. It just really has to be
a site that people can access,
a location where it is accessible.
Okay.
Individuals have access to the different services, and whether it's food, whatever that might be.
So, I in my mind, I know one place that's really promising. I think Jim and Lisa maybe know another place that might be promising. If any of you know of any other places that are worth looking at, let us know.
I do have one more thing that I'd like to. I know that you're going to make an action plan to go along with this. And my question is, do you want a motion from the group tonight to accept the draft plan and propose that to the council?
No.
Or should we wait until we get the?
I don't think we're ready for that.
Okay, that was my question.
I don't know. And why I say I don't know is we're going to need some council input soon, because especially, if this is a plan that they are going to support moving forward, that will impact on some of the property we can look at. I mean, I would, if we're looking at, let's say, a piece of property that maybe the county is in control of, I would assume that they would still want support from the city, before they would potentially agree to something such as that.
So that's why I said
good
we
thinking,
can make a motion to support the draft document that
Okay.
you've sent here, and looking forward to the action plan to come with that later, and because then that would trigger that up to the council being able to look at that as a support from us.
Yeah, I don't know that you need a formal motion. I think we can,
Just
I-
on the-
I have this as a PDF document. I can just send it to,
I think it would be better.
I'll send it to the council as a draft and
With support, so.
Okay.
So,
And I believe we are under charter to complete an action plan, and I don't see a problem with that. And where we have gaps, we just say acquire property or stuff like that. But we do, I agree, we should have an action plan that kind of better defines next steps.
okay. So are you making a motion? You're
I-
waiting for the
I
action
would make a
plan?
motion.
I'm assuming that was a second.
No, sure.
Any more discussion? Okay, seeing that there's no discussion, all in favor, say aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, no opposition, motion passes. Thank you. And if Julie calls you and wants to know exactly that wording, that's.
Just,
I was thinking the same thing.
just that we support the concept of the draft proposal, and that we would propose or support that in its concept.
Okay, thank you for reiterating that.
And Ray, make sure it's this one, not the whole thing that was on the, I left out the last slide on purpose. It's, you have it,
This
but
one?
it's not in this. The last slide is not something that we want to do.
We can take
This
it on.
one?
No, the one that's actually on your computer. I'll
Okay.
meet with you afterwards.
Okay, yeah.
What you have there is what we're talking about right now.
Yes.
Okay,
There's actually one additional page that I decided that it wasn't appropriate to present it.
okay.
So
We'll look at it
Okay,
up here, yeah.
thank you. Chief Lynn, do you have anything you'd like to present?
No, nothing for me.
Thank you. Sean? Bob?
Nothing for me.
Jim?
Nothing.
Okay, Dick?
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
Brock, do you have anything else you'd like to bring up?
Just thank you for inviting me and allowing me to participate with you.
Thank you very much for being here and for your expertise. Shirley, is there anything you'd like to bring up?
No, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you very much for being here also. We really appreciate you guys. Okay. All right. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Second. All in favor?
Dick?
Anybody opposed? Okay, we've adjourned.
Dick.
Thanks.
Dick?
Yeah.
This is, I don't know whether he can get it or not, but this is what it looks like on the.
I've got it on my stuff. I can send it to him.
I think I've seen it.